Before we start off today's episode, we want to preemptively say what it is and what the purpose is, because this is going to be the first of at least 2 episodes we do on the He Gets Us campaign. This episode is strictly about what it is, very matter of fact. This is what the organization is. This is their stated goals. This is the structure of everything, because we want to lay that foundation for 2 reasons. One, so that when we get into the content, what they're actually producing, is it good, is it bad, is it woke, is it not, that we have the time to really do that, because there's already a lot here. We have found a lot of information. We want to be able to have the time to present it to you. Also, you're about to see them, or you just saw them with their ads on the Super Bowl. And so we want to get that basic understanding out there for when you see them and or have just seen them. Uh, and beyond that, we're not 100% done with our investigation. We've had the opportunity to be in contact with a representative from He Gets Us, not a whistleblower, an actual representative that knows that we don't agree with them, and getting some questions answered. So we're getting better and more detailed information, and we hope to continue that process for a couple more weeks and then release the full findings. But until then, let's get into the episode.
Welcome to the Wokepedia podcast. The Wokepedia podcast, of course, is a ministry of enemies within the church. And of course, you can go to enemieswithinthechurch.com. Once again, it's enemieswithinthechurch.com. And you can find all of our stuff over there. And of course, you can donate to that great cause, Enemies Within the Church, which is just an incredible ministry. And it started off, of course, with that documentary, Enemies Within the Church. If you haven't seen that, you need to go ahead and get your copy, whether that's the DVD or the Blu-ray or the download. You need to get that and you need to check it out. But I'm your host, Pastor Sam. And of course, I'm joined, like always, with Kyle, Mr. Witt himself. How's it going, Kyle?
It's going... Actually, you already know how it's going. We talked before this. It's been a little bit of a day, many little incidents happening, but God is good, and
That's right.
We're gonna have a great episode here, very informative episode. So I'm excited to get into it. And how are you doing, Sam?
Yeah. Kyle, that's the way that it goes. Some days things are better than others, but God doesn't change even when our days do. And so that's one thing that we can rest our hat on, and so we can praise the Lord for that. And I'm doing well. I'm excited for the Super Bowl, although the Sunday evening services generally go a little bit longer, so I probably won't get to watch it. We'll just kind of have to check out the box score, but that's okay. That's how it's been pretty much my entire life, and I don't mind that at all. My wife, who's a Chiefs fan, might care a little bit more, but she's still gonna be worshiping Jesus. What about you? Do you got a dog in this fight here with the Super Bowl?
I intentionally stopped following major sports even before all the kind of nonsense of the past few years came out, just because it became way too much of a distraction for me. Being up in the Seattle area, I was a Seahawks fan, and it just got a little bit too exciting, a little bit too heated at points, and I finally just went, you know what? This is just a distraction for me. So I don't even know.
Yeah.
Which is kind of freeing.
Yeah. I can understand that. It was last year, I think, when I was watching an Iowa State basketball game, though it's not pro sports, it's college sports. Iowa State basketball has always kind of been my thing, and the refs made just a terrible call, and all of a sudden I start yelling at the TV screen and calling the ref a liberal. Is when my wife looked at me and said, I think you're maybe a little bit too invested in this. When I went, was yelling that the ref was clearly a liberal and was as blind as a bat because I mean only a liberal could make such a dumb call and things like that. It also might show what a little bit of my values are right there. But no, being a former Seahawks fan, I gotta pivot from that right there because I'm sure that'll be clipped at some point by somebody to point that out. But being a Seahawks fan, being an Iowa State fan, I don't know if you remember Seneca Wallace, the backup quarterback, clear back in the day.
Oh my goodness. I loved Seneca Wallace. Not that great. Well, I'm honestly a good football player in the spectrum of things. Could beat the pants off your average person, but when it came to the NFL, not the greatest.
Yeah,
But gosh, was he entertaining and fun.
he was. He was. I just remember, playing Madden. I don't know if you ever played that. And it was like a cheat code to use him because not because he could throw, because he couldn't throw, but he could outrun everybody. And so you just go and, quarterback scramble back in the day. But you guys aren't here to listen to us talk about sports. But we did bring up the Super Bowl, and that is important because we're going to be talking about He Gets Us today, and they have secured a little bit of time on the Super Bowl, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But let's get into
Mhm.
He Gets Us. What is He Gets Us, Kyle?
Well, and like we already said, we want this to be the very like answer the question, what is it? And so kind of from their perspective, He Gets Us is a marketing campaign to quote reintroduce people to Jesus. And continue quote here, the goal to reintroduce to our culture the real Jesus of the Bible, not the distorted, polarizing version that's so prevalent in America today. That's a quote from Bill McKendry of Haven, one of the companies that operates He Gets Us.
I, I'm
Uh,
I'm just I'm just sitting here, Kyle, going, oh, at that quote already, and it's the first one, and yet we got to stay focused. This is going to be tough.
yeah, we're not going to get deep into the content today, uh,
Y-
because again,
y-
we're also giving them an opportunity to respond to some tough questions, uh, and I do
You,
mean
you
tough
know,
questions.
you know,
But
Kyle,
we want to get down
didn't
to truth.
yeah, they say the Jesus of the Bible and not the polarizing one. Jesus literally said that he came not to bring peace, but to bring a sword, and that he would set family members against one another. I mean, Jesus is pretty polarizing, the Jesus of the Bible. I just want to say that.
Yeah, and for the moment, we'll put a pin in that, and we'll give them the tiniest bit of credit. Which that actually would have been a great question. I'll see if our contact would be willing to answer that question as well. But continuing on, what kind of their stated goal or stated purpose? Uh, the campaign seeks to build common ground with people and open doors for churches to better evangelize. So what they mean there, that wasn't a quote, that was a summary, but what they mean is they're very explicit. We're not an evangelistic campaign in the sense that we're preaching the gospel and we want this campaign to see people saved. Their goal, as they communicated it, again, directly, I got to directly ask those questions. Um, and we'll be releasing more on that as well when we go deeper. But their goal is to be essentially a support organization. They're going to put Jesus out there, get Jesus into conversation, and then your church can then capitalize on that. Um, I think there's some issues with that, but let's continue on. A couple quotes
Y-
kind of proving that the goal is not Christian conversion. John Lee from Lerma, another company that operates He Gets Us. Ultimately, the goal is inspiration, not recruitment or conversion. Jason Vanderground from Haven. Again, they're not. They're very clear with their goal. They don't want to see the conversion. They want someone else to do that part. But
which
do
in
they
in
actually?
theory,
We'll talk about that.
yeah, let's just take it kind of at face value here for just a moment before we dig a little bit deeper and pull more layers of the onion back. It, in theory, that's not necessarily horrible to go in to say we want to be a tool to see others, come to Christ in that, or to see others bring people to Christ. In fact, it could be rooted in a
Mhm.
good area of going and saying, we want local churches to lead people to the Lord because we want the local churches then to disciple them and to have actually a vested interest in these people, and these people to have a vested interest in the local church. For kind of an example as to why somebody might say this, if you look at the evangelistic crusades of Billy Graham, and I know we could have a long, long line of comments about the bad things of Billy Graham or about the people who love Billy Graham, but that's not my point here. It's not to bring up the polarization of Billy Graham. It's just about the method of Billy Graham, that he would
Mhm.
come into town, people would get saved, or at least make a conversion or a profession of faith, and then what would end up happening was that they a lot of times would not actually be connected to a local church. A lot of times they'd be connected, or to even a Christian to disciple them at all. They would just be connected to the crusade ministry. Later on, we see this with televangelist, and it can cause all kinds of doctrinal problems and a lot of problems within the growth of a Christian. So you could actually be having this in a positive way. Now, I'm not trying to defend he gets us when I say this, Kyle. I'm just trying to put forth a feasible path for how something like this, at least in their stated goal, could be not terrible, because they're going to be people. We're both, me and you are from Baptist backgrounds, and Baptists can make anything evangelistic. That's kind of one of the things that they say about Baptists. And so, a lot
Yep.
of people are from Baptist backgrounds, and so evangelism is a high priority. But looking at this, do you think that's really where they're coming from?
And
Or
that
or do
I
we
mean,
just
that's
need
why
to
we're
kinda
doing
march
we're
forward?
investigating.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, that's why we're investigating. That's why we're asking the questions, because it doesn't seem like it. That's the
right.
problem. And that was the one of the main thrusts I had when I got to have a conversation. Again, we're trying to continue that conversation, which is exciting. But that was one of the main
Right.
thrusts I had. It's like, look, the bones of what you're saying sound potentially good,
Potentially.
but there's a lot of other going on, and it seems the outworking of it. We have some serious concerns, serious questions, serious issues that have popped up, and we need to look at those.
Right.
But continuing on, they focus, and again, this is a very explicit stated thing. They focus on Jesus the man, and with that, it seems to be, again, from what they say, from everything they said, to make him more relatable and relevant. Again, going back to the idea of they want to reintroduce people to Jesus. Now, one thing, again, going to this, like, okay, I do know that a lot of people, they hear about Jesus and they hear that Christians consider him God, and then they react of, no, Jesus was just a man. They have no concept of, the theology behind it, of Jesus. Yeah, he's fully God and fully man, and that's why he's able to save us. Um, but they're not. They're separating things, and they seem to avoid his divinity, explicitly devoid his divinity, and they do in fact, they avoid his divinity in things. But they seem to avoid it as it's something that they describe that people struggle with. They struggle to grasp his divinity, and thus it doesn't fit with their idea of building common ground. Uh, so the reason for not bringing up his divinity is shaky, to say the least. Because Sam, can you be saved by a Christ who is not God?
No, no, I mean, absolutely not. And this is important. This is a key foundational theological truth, is that Jesus is 100% God and he's 100% man. He's 100%
Mhm.
God, which means that he can save us. He has the power to save us, but he's 100% man, which is what allows him to be our sympathetic high priest. Which it's interesting because it seems like they're trying to make a play on that idea of being a sympathetic high priest with the idea that he can relate to us and he's relevant to us. But one of the things that I think is really important to remember, and this is going to come up to play in future episodes more than today's episode, but I just want to plant this idea
Yeah.
and remind you of this. And this is something that Kyle you brought up before. When Jesus sympathizes, he never sympathizes with our sin. He that we've sinned. That's something that he doesn't
Mhm.
sympathize with. He sympathizes
Yep.
with the fact that we're going through hardships, that we're going through trials, that we're going through even temptations, but he's sympathizing in the sense of having to go through them, but going through them as yet without sin, not as actually
Yeah.
sinning. And that's
Yep.
important to remember
And
when we consider the relevancy of Jesus.
yeah. And it's not even just that he didn't sin. There was no desire to sin.
Right.
Like his the temptations that he can sympathize with us in our human uh frailness, only in the sense that he understands what it is to live a human life on earth and be tempted. But it stops right there. There's no desire to sin. There
Right.
was no actual sin. So because desiring to sin in and of itself is sin. I mean, Jesus himself makes that very clear.
Mhm.
Um, and he slams the Pharisees because they essentially they made sin only the external action. But again, that raises a huge question of what do they mean when they talk about Jesus as human? What do they mean when they talk about Jesus as relevant because of his humanity? What do they mean about Jesus gets us through the fact that he was human? What is that understanding that he has? What is that compassion? What is that love that he has? It's never defined, which is a bit of a problem.
That's a
Um
big problem.
yeah. Like I said, introducing people to Jesus is great. If that's what they were doing, if they were, very upfront and clear about who Jesus was and they were just introducing him, they were essentially acting as a almost like a tract, but airing on TV, maybe not as explicitly gospel presenting, but if they're operating as that and people were going, "Wow, did you see that commercial?" They probably wouldn't like it because it would be more offensive to them. That'd be great. But again, they make this statement that they want to stick to their lane. They want to stick to their lane. They know what their limits are. They know what their goal are. They're going to stick to their lane. But my goodness, does it seem that they go way beyond that? And does it seem that they're just presenting Jesus as a spiritual guru to be, to learn from? Oh, look, and this has been a problem that we've seen. It's syncretism,
Right.
where Jesus is presented to people uh, in a way that they go, "Oh, wow, we like that Jesus." And they take Jesus and they put him next to all their other gods.
Mhm.
They're not actually interested in the Jesus who is the one and only God, Jesus who is the exclusive way of salvation, the Jesus that to follow you have to walk the narrow road. And that again, that's really the big concern. And as an example, here's another quote from them. He gets us simply invites all to consider the story of a man who created a radical love movement that continues to impact the world thousands of years later. Many churches focus on Jesus' experiences, but you don't have to go to church or even believe in Christianity to find value in them. Whether you consider yourself a Christian, a believer in another faith, a spiritual explorer, or not religious or spiritual in any way, we invite you to hear about Jesus and uh, and be inspired by his example. Again, Sam, are they presenting a Jesus that you can, is robust, that gets people at least moving in the direction of the true Jesus of the Bible, or does it seem like they're lowering the bar so far that it's a Jesus that can appeal to literally everyone
You know,
without requiring any sort of change?
I'm pretty sure I ran out of fingers trying to count the number of heresies in that quote, um, that were presented, or at least hinted at. And I think
That
that kind
that
of
right there,
answers the
the
question,
hinting at
right?
is really a problem. Yeah.
Um, because I mean,
Uh,
whether you consider yourself a Christian, a believer in another faith, how can you be a believer in another faith? Well, like, are they saying I took that as being a believer in Jesus, but being in another faith, which is called Universalism, or are they saying like you're
well,
just a believer of another faith? Like, I
I think their point is to be like Jesus is good no matter
for
who you
everybody,
are, and
right?
they're trying to appeal, but the
To the
problem is they've gone so
agnostic, the
far that
spiritual
they've
explorer, or not religious in any way, or spiritual in any way. I mean, that's so the atheist now. Hey, here we go. Um, but it's not
yeah, again,
inviting them to
they've
hear
gone
about
past the point.
Jesus.
Yes. They've gone
It, it,
past that point.
it's to hear about Jesus and be inspired by his example, which gets okay, it hints at another really big heresy that's out there that is specifically in progressive and woke Christianity, and that is the denial of the penile atonement, in the substitutionary atonement. And in looking at this, that Jesus actually took our place on the cross, because one of the big atonement theories that's out there that progressive Christianity likes to use is that Jesus is just an example on the cross. And so, therefore, because Jesus was willing to
Mhm.
lay down his life for other people, so you should be willing to lay down your life for other people. And that's really the point of Jesus going to the cross. It's not to pay the penalty for
Mhm.
your sin. That's what they go
Yep.
out and say, progressive Christianity, and that's what this statement that you just read, Kyle, screams to me that they're at least pointing towards.
And that's something very, very interesting. Um, so in my conversation, getting a chance to have a conversation, it wasn't like an official interview. Hopefully we could get that done. But in my conversation with the he gets this representative, um, he actually acknowledged explicitly by name penal substitutionary atonement.
Really,
So at least, yeah, so at least people in the positions, and he's one of the people that is officially authorized as a he gets us representative. As in, if he says something, it is official. He gets us stance on things,
yep,
which to me almost makes some of these statements worse, because if you're behind closed doors, if you're acknowledging the right things, but then you're putting out something like better than
right,
what's said here. Which
hmm
again, it goes into we have some deep concerns, and we're hoping to get, again, it'd be great. We put the offer out there. We hope that he'd be willing to come on with us, and we're willing to name names here, and the reason that I haven't so far is just because we're continuing that conversation at the current moment. When the
right.
investigation's done, we're going to lay out all the information and give you the citations and references for everything. Um, but again, we're not going to break down the issues, the beliefs, the teachings, the kind of the background of the different entities involved right now. Uh, so let's continue on. Now, something that we need to understand, that I know people have questions about, and there's been a lot of even in media things.
Mhm.
So, whether it's Christian media, supposedly Christian media, like Christianity Today, or I forget some. I think Religious News Service has also done pieces on them, or secular media covering it. They actually get a lot of these details wrong, which was something I was thankful that I could get get a true understanding of the breakdown of it. Now I did a bunch of research beforehand, and I was pretty confident about it, but it was nice to get that kind of confirmation. Um,
Right.
so the structure of "He Gets Us,"
Yeah, who's behind
and
He
once I
Gets Us?
explain this, yeah, you'll see some of the language, and you'll start to understand a little bit better, because there's certain things when they're said sound confusing, but the money and the creators are a donor advised fund called the Signatory. So the Signatory operates He Gets Us LLC, the actual He Gets Us campaign, but that's essentially what's called a DBA, a doing business as.
Right.
So the Signatory operates this LLC as essentially just a shell organization, or just a name that then everything all the operations then use. Um, but in
It
function, there are three companies that are the day to day He Gets Us campaign. Uh, so if you're ever interacting with He Gets Us, you're interacting with one of these three companies, and that's Haven, a creative hub, which is seems to handle the coordination for the campaign and marketing,
Mhm.
and then an ad agency called Lerma, which covers they handle the ads, and that's what you're going to see on the Super Bowl. That's going to be made by Lerma. What is on the online, that's made by Lerma. The website that's connected to the ads, the hegetsus.com, that's run by Lerma. And then the third company is Glue, not GLUE, GLOO, Glue. And they handle the technology and communications. So that means that if you contact He Gets Us through one of their contact options on the websites, it's Glue that you begin interacting with, whether that's live chatting, whether that's texting, whether that's asking to connect with someone local. Glue's going to handle that. Glue's going to pass that on to a church locally. Glue's going to handle directly. Their staff is the ones that do the live chat. Um, as well, they also host on their platform. They host and even seem to produce some of the He Gets Us content, some of the resources, not the ads, the resources. And uh, among those three companies, each one has uh, a sort of official spokesperson that speaks for the campaign, and then will handle interviews. But again, when they speak, it's something considered authoritative. That was a question I asked, and I got to speak to one of those representatives. Uh, so, Sam, as someone who did not do that part of the research,
Mhm.
is that clear? Do you understand the corporate structure of the He Gets Us campaign?
Yeah,
Uh,
it's
I
a
want to
little
I want to
bit.
make sure you understand it before we move on.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a little bit confusing. I'm sure, especially if people haven't been doing much with corporations and stuff like that, they might be going, "Why do you have an
Hmm.
LLC?" Well, part of the reason you have an LLC is so you can use three different entities, so that it's not just one thing doing three divisions and creating a whole new company. That's part. I mean, they did create a whole new company
Exactly.
with an LLC, but that's part of why they do that. Also, there's probably legal reasons why you use an LLC and tax reasons you use an LLC as well.
Yep.
Basically, you
Well,
have three different jobs, three different divisions, and they've
hmm
hired out three companies, or three companies have come together and they're working together, and that's what He Gets Us is. That's basically
yeah.
what's
Rather
going on.
than them having to make a brand new company and hire staff for that company. They're leveraging existing companies, which are all three claim to be Christian companies. I should say that as well. Uh, Now, another advantage of having the He Gets Us LLC is they can put that on things. They can put, even though Lerma created the ad, where it's required when they have to put, who created it, they can say He Gets
He
Us.
gets us. Right.
So it means that everything can be officially legally branded as He Gets Us.
Yeah.
Um,
Which
so
I
that
mean,
that's not some sort
not
of
to
like
make fun
shady
of.
tactic.
Right. Yeah, and not to make fun of, Lerma or Glue or whatnot, because I'm sure they have reasons why they chose the names that they did within the realm that they're in, but you probably don't want, your ad by Lerma or Glue. He Gets Us is a better
I'm
branding
gonna
name in
make you
my
feel.
opinion.
I'm gonna make you feel a little bit silly. Lerma is the last name of the founder.
Well, you know, not everybody can have a good name like James. Oh,
Yeah, we'll go with good name.
yeah.
We won't go with
Oh,
a incredibly generic, boring name.
right. That's
So,
also true. People are always trying to
so
keep
why
up.
did we want to bring all this up? Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Sorry. Sorry. Just
Yeah,
had
it's
to throw
gonna
that
that's
out
gonna
there.
fly right past a lot of people. But, uh, so why are we bringing all this up again? Give you that foundation, but we also want to talk about the next thing, the Super Bowl. They're going to be running two ads on the Super Bowl, one 30-second, one 60-second. Uh, Sam, if you're looking at the notes, I accidentally wrote down 90 seconds. It's 90 seconds
Okay.
total. Um, they're spending roughly $20 million on these ads. That is
Which is probably
a
the going rate.
second-hand number. Yeah, yeah. I looked at the number. Even that's a second-hand number that I got. That's the going rate for 90 seconds. Seems to be this year $20 million.
Yeah.
They're operating those ads under the idea of the third way. Now, anyone that's listened to us or listened to other people that discuss these same social justice topics, same wokeness topics, uh, that's not the same third way as Tim Keller's political third way approach, that Jesus is the third way politically. Um, and then he just ends up going left. Their third way is about love. Love is the third way rather than anger or avoidance. And we'll let them summarize it. What they're going to be talking about is we all know what it's like to be a kid, and we all know what it's like to disagree with people who see things differently than we might. This year's Super Bowl spots entertain these two sides of our relationships, the simple kindness of children, and, when spurred by disagreement, the jaded anger of adults. So we'll see when they actually release the ads, and then we'll talk about those more. But it really seems to be that they're kind of presenting a Jesus was. Well,
For
Sam,
you know,
I know you had some
for
comments before.
well, just hearing that, it makes me laugh that they're saying they want to introduce people to Jesus, and then they literally in their description of their ads don't use the name Jesus. Just point that out. That's probably
Very rarely.
neither
They sometimes do, but it's always like a surprise at the end. Oh, but we're talking about Jesus.
right.
Uh,
But no,
yeah.
the third way in the third way of love, this isn't a new idea. And I'm sure we'll have a lot more to dive into once we see the ads from the Super Bowl, and we'll be excited to dive into these things. But that third way being love, that's classic situational ethics. That's literally what Joseph Fletcher presented, and so that is really interesting that they, yeah, that kind of seems to be the thing that's encompassing everything. I'm excited to dive into that, but we're just trying to stay surface level here today.
Hmm. Yeah, and if you haven't seen, we did an episode on situation ethics. So if you haven't seen it, uh, go watch or listen to that episode, and you'll get a little bit more of an understanding of
You,
that
you know,
and why this kind of springs to our why the idea of situation ethics springs to our minds when we read this.
right, and for those who go out and do listen, to our, episode on situation ethics, can you go ahead and do us a favor and send us an email at contactwokepedia@gmail.com? Go ahead and send that to us and just let us know what you think about that, and let us know if you can see
Mm-hmm.
why we're saying what we're saying here.
Mm,
So if you go back and listen to it,
yeah.
remember to email us at contactwokepedia@gmail.com. And even if you don't go back and listen to it, we'd still love to hear from you, and go ahead and just send us an email there as well.
Oh yeah, we definitely
Just thought I
love
had to
getting
throw that out
your
there.
emails. No, it's good timing. But we definitely
Yeah.
love getting people's emails, and we love. There's been some really good engagement, particularly recently in the emails. Um, but then the kind of the last section we want to focus on is that he gets us does is they create resources. So beyond just the ads, they also create resources for churches and Christians to use. So this includes they have their Engaging Culture series, which is a series of videos hosted by Ed Stetzer. And they so far featured guests such as Andy Stanley, Albert Tate, Max Lucado. Uh, and
Ye
since we just mentioned Max, um, this, if you notice, the He Gets Us book, yes, they released a book. Look at the name on the bottom. It's Max, um, which is very interesting. Now, the book is they all their print versions of their ads that they have online. They just included these in this book, and then there's snippets from Max as well. We'll go into exactly what's in the book at another time, but uh, they also create study guides for the different ads. So they have write ups of them online, but then they also have study guides that you can get. Uh, for like a group study. Um, then they
I
have
I missed this next
oh
one. I totally read over that when I was looking over the outline. I cannot believe this.
yeah, and I just realized I should have put this further down as kind of like a because
We
it's
we can move it
very
down if you want to.
let's do that then. Let's keep people interested. Um, they also create Bible reading plans through the U Version Bible app, which are very they're nothing special. I looked at some of them; they didn't seem anything like bad or weird, but they were just kind of a very generic little Bible reading plan. Um, they also have texting campaigns centered around the ads. So if you're a church, you can get these texting campaigns, and then you can put people's phone numbers into the system that Glue has, and then automatically send these out at specific intervals to get people watching the ads and thinking about these big questions.
This is
Um,
like
they
if a
also have
church growth movement went and decided to do Super Bowl ads. That's kind of what I'm coming to the conclusion of here.
oh, it really is. It's like an massive extension and explosion of the secret sensitive movement.
Mhm.
Again, just on a massive next level.
Right.
And again, we'll get to their content another time and expand on that idea. But then they also have customizable surveys that you can run to get they call it the Jesus Pulse assessment. So get a pulse on your church or other people's views of Jesus. And that's run via Barna.
Are we
Uh,
sure that Rick Warren's not behind all this, Kyle? Are we sure? This I mean, are we sure there's not a
he's a partner.
Hawaiian shirt wearing man behind the mask here?
Yeah, he's a partner with them. Saddleback got in at the ground floor before it was a publicly announced thing.
Yeah, I mean,
Saddleback
he's
was
retired
involved.
now though. It's Andy Wood that's over there now, so, but
Okay, retired is a strong word.
true,
Um,
true. We got more
there's a
coming out
difference
someday
between
about Rick
being
Warren too.
oh yeah, Well, because he always has more coming out himself. He never stops.
Yeah.
Um, but continuing on, they also produce graphics, slides, and other promotional assets, specifically for churches to use. Like they want you to have
Right.
them, if you have a slideshow for your announcements, they want you to slot some of those in. They have banners and all sorts of things, and they want you to promote He Gets Us with the idea that then you're also promoting your church. Um, they also have free merchandise, so stickers, shirts. I think there was hats. I think even like water bottles. There's a bunch of stuff, and your church has free access to them. You can just order them and get these assets that all promote He Gets Us. And then again, the idea is we're promoting He Gets Us, therefore we're promoting our church and we're promoting Jesus. Um, if they weren't free, I'd accuse them of just trying to push their brand. But they are free, and I haven't found a revenue model, like something that He Gets Us earns money off of. Uh, so they do seem to be honest in that sense,
The,
in their intent. There's just, again, it's very questionable what they're doing. But now the last
sh-
thing,
yeah.
one
And
of the
this is
other
insane.
big things they do. Yes. Um, they also have pre-made sermons based on the ads, uh, available for free for churches to get. And they have slides to go with them. They have, it's not just an outline, and it's not something that you even have to adapt. It's a full-on scripted sermon. Everything's ready to go. Again, you can have a whole slideshow ready to go. Uh,
It,
and they
the,
have them not just.
this is the best part. This is like next level here. This is docent on steroids.
Well, yeah, because docent, they hide behind we're not actually creating the scripted out sermon. We're just being a resource. And the implication is if people abuse that by just preaching our notes, then that's on them. No, He Gets Us just puts it out there. And they even create separate expository and topical versions of the
Hey,
sermons.
so if
Um,
you're E free, you can get your topical one, and if you're Baptist, you can get your expository one. That's what they're saying.
yeah. And this is one of the things that, right now, before we go into later, when we go into, the actual content, this is something we'll nail them on. That is gross. That is
It's
not
terrible.
responsible pastoring, and knock it off. Pastors knock it off. Companies knock. I know there's tons of companies out there. Docent is not the only one. There's tons of companies. Uh, Most of them just have pre-made sermons like this, and you could just buy access. It needs to stop. This is not good. It violates everything about shepherding a flock to just
I,
use a pre-made sermon. Uh,
Kyle, you've done some preaching before. Undeniably, you've done that. You've done some preaching long term, and in looking over some flocks and things like that. In some ways, can you imagine having somebody else write and script out your sermon?
I can't even imagine. So, well, I can't even imagine myself doing that.
Yeah, I know that. I'm in the
Uh, you
same
know, there's a
boat.
yeah, there was a time when I was it hit me the hardest on this front of just like I can't believe writing any of this out. Really need to rely on God. But while I was in the middle of being an interim pastor at a very small church, I was also dealing with some growing health issues, and I would go out, leave the congregation before preaching for a while, and literally just be like praying that God has mercy on these people, because I knew I was not even close to 100% for both presentation and for the study I'd put in beforehand. And I was just like, God, please have mercy on this congregation and, use me while I'm up there. And God
Mhm.
is faithful. And through that humility, a preacher has to be that's the biggest thing they need is humility. He was faithful to them. But the
Yeah.
other things, I don't know about you. If you've ever preached the same sermon twice, Uh, oh my goodness, I could never imagine doing a back to back, like 2 services. But have preached, quote, the same sermon more than once,
Yep.
but
It's never the same.
every time I do, it's never the same, and it comes with a full round of new study and essentially rewriting the sermon and trying to better present it, trying to I've done preaching at different churches, filling pulpit, and I always try and talk with whether they have a pastor and he's going to be gone, I'm just filling, or they just have some other leadership because they don't have a pastor at the current moment. I always talk with the pastor or whoever's the leadership at the moment, and we'll try and go, where's the congregation at?
Yep.
What sort of struggles have been going on? What has the congregation? Because I'm trying to actually, I can't shepherd them just coming in and preaching one week, but I'm trying to be a part of that shepherding process and not just presenting them. Why would they need me? Why, if I'm going to preach the same sermon again, if I'm just going to not care about the congregation enough to actually preach to them and actually be relevant because I'm caring about them, I'm investing into them, I'm meeting them where they're at, I'm listening to God's guidance, I'm relying on the Holy Spirit so that I'm preaching the message that they need to hear, not just the message I think would be interesting. Why would they need me? If they can just go get a he gets us. Yes, I'm very frustrated, by the way. If they can just go get a he gets us sermon, why not just go get a book? Go get a book and do a book reading.
Right. It's denying
Yeah.
the spiritual aspect of what's happening, that God is setting forth an order. He's setting forth his man there in the pulpit to proclaim his message. And what ends up happening then is that his grace flows sideways. They're cutting that out by going and saying, like, look, all we need is somebody who can go and present well, and here's a sermon for you. You don't need to pray about this. You don't need to go and to study this. You don't need to go and to relate this to the people that God has given you. You don't need any supernatural grace. You just need to be able to either read or memorize a script. These are the things that bother me, because it also is setting a parachurch organization above the local church.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not they
Yep.
really want to admit that, whenever somebody goes and starts messing with the pulpit, goes and starts trying to use the pulpit and manipulate the pulpit to say something, or flat out just say, here, say this, that right there is usurping the authority of the local church, and that's a
Yeah.
major issue that we face today.
Well, and again, we're gonna really dive into it, but that's really a huge problem. The way that he gets us relates to the local church is problematic. They
Right.
definitely, by function, not explicit purpose, uh, but by function, they set themselves above the local church. They're not really a supportive organization, uh, in the sense of servant underneath, providing something to. No, I mean, to give sermons. I didn't put these down in the notes, but their ad reads. They have a whole ton of ad reads to get people prepared for the Super Bowl, and they literally have scripted out things you're supposed to say that include insert church name here, insert church mission statement here, insert all that kind of stuff.
Right.
They're
And
dictating how you're supposed to speak to your church, and even if they say it's just an option, it's still wrong.
right. And it's the wrong option. It, and I think this gives us a pretty good foundation for what he gets us is, at least in their structure. Some of the where we're hinting at least at some of the problems that they have, and we want to sound
Hmm.
forth the warning, because you're about to millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, are about to see this ad, yeah, go out over the Super Bowl. It's the time when TV is most watched. It's the time when people are glued to their television, and some people watch the
Hmm.
Super Bowl just for the ads. And of course, there's a
Yep.
chance here. Our podcast comes out the Friday before the Super Bowl. there's a chance that in the morning, Sunday morning, that your pastor is actually using the "he gets us" stuff, and we want you to be aware of it. If you start hearing that phrase, "he gets us," or seeing that marking of "he gets us," we want you to know this is on Wokepedia for a reason. It's it's a problem that's coming up, and we're going to expose that problem. And of course, you're going to be doing that with
Yeah.
thorough research. And so you need to, if you see that
Yeah.
at your church, tune in and listen to what we're going to be presenting.
Yeah. And people have accused us before of I don't know why there's this perception. Several people have accused us, whether in person or email or other things, of not going to people beforehand. Like, we do. In fact, we
Right.
got an official person that he gets us that we're in communication with. A lot of times they don't want to talk to us. I do appreciate that. I do appreciate the transparency of being willing to talk, but they do have issues. Now we are being gracious enough to them of delaying a final breakdown of things until we get those some answers back or give them, at least a decent amount of time to give us those answers. But it doesn't look good. And to be blunt, I don't see a possible way, any possible answer they could give that recovers uh, the serious problems that they have. Well, at a minimum, there's nothing that's going to cover up those sermons. That's
Right.
just bad. But yeah, we hope this has been helpful. And if it has, like, subscribe, do those kind of things. Um, Follow the podcast, share it with other people, and email us. We want to hear from you. Again,
That's right.
contact wokepedia at gmail.com. We do legitimately, we love interacting with people. We know that there are some emails that have slipped through the cracks over time, and we are making sure that any of those that did, even if they're old, get responded to. But we love interacting with you. And again, there's been some great content recently. Uh, and on that note, I mean, we didn't talk about this beforehand, but we've talked about this before. We'd love to get some more interaction going and do some viewer questions. Bring up things
Right.
that people are asking from email or commenting on Facebook, things like that. Uh, but Sam, anything else to add to this before we wrap her up?
I think I don't think so. So I guess it's time to to wrap it up and just say keep standing for the truth.
And remember, don't go woke.